I happened to be in the Faulkner Gallery one day, and there was an AIA exhibit going on. And as I walked around the room, many of the images were by Ciro. So I took a photo with my iPhone and got his contact information and called him and told him who I was, what I was looking for, and that's how this program came to be. But as you can see from his biography and his background, he has a very diverse and long professional career, which includes architecture photography, but so much more. And anyway, I'm really excited to present him to our club, and I think we pronounce his name Ciro Coelho. Ciro, I'm leaving it to you.
Thank you very much, Deb. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I'm excited to share a little bit about my passion and my story with you. I've had a very, very eclectic career in photography. And I think part of it is being Brazilian. That's how we are, I guess. And this is, so I ask you to please bear with me. I'm just admitting someone that I know. But I think, Bill, I'll leave it up to you, so I don't need to focus on that.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and watch for new people coming in.
Okay. This is my first photography presentation on Zoom. I lead groups, weekly groups, so I'm familiar with the platform, but photography is the first time, so I ask you to please bear with me. I'm going to use three different. I'm going to use Lightroom, I'm going to use the web, and I'm going to use QuickTime to show a slideshow, since Bill advised me not to use video here. I have done some video as well. So just a brief, and I'm going to alternate between speaking and showing. So this is kind of fresher rather than the same thing for a long time. And I was thinking too that at some point, maybe Bill, when I'm showing I'm going to tell a story, show some previous work. And then when I'm showing architectural photography, that's a good time for people to, even though my screen is going to be shared, people can ask questions while I'm showing architectural work, but I'll tell you.
Okay, and we can do that with raising hands or people just sending a message to me, or send it to everyone, and we'll see them. Okay,
and I will not, so I'll let you handle that. I'm not going to deal with answering, so I don't lose my train of thought here.
Perfect.
So I did get a camera when I was 7, and that's when it all started. But I had no idea I was ever going to be a professional until much later. I never had a camera, a real camera. I had a Kodak Instamatic 33, which is not really a camera. And it was when I went to Switzerland at 20 that I worked and I could afford to buy my first Nikon camera. I spent a year in Switzerland, and then I came back at the time in Brazil. And I was going to college to study advertising and marketing. I wanted to work in that industry, and I loved photography, but it was only a hobby. And then one day, the best advertising and fashion photographer came to the school where I was studying, and gave a lecture that blew my mind and changed my life. And I'm very driven, and I've had many stories, and I'll tell you 2 or 3 of my drivenness here tonight. And this must have been a Thursday or a Friday, and on Monday I called his studio, and I talked to his producer, to his studio manager, and I said, you know, I listened to Duran's lecture last week, and it changed my life. And it changed my life. I have to talk to him. And I was so convincing that I got an appointment with him the next day. And I came up to him, and this is the best photographer in the country. And I came up to him and I said, I have to work with you. I don't want to work with anyone else. I want to learn photography from you. Please give me a job. He said, I'm very flattered, but I don't have a position for you, but I know a place that does. So he sent me to a studio that at the time, it doesn't exist anymore, but this is 1988. It's the studio of the largest publishing house in Brazil. And there were 15 photographers that worked there. And I got to assist for all of them. And that was my photography university, or at least the first portion of it. And then I thought, okay, advertising, beauty, fashion. Then I got a taste of it and I was really disappointed. And I really didn't feel like it was something for me. And I wanted to, so purpose and meaning has been always a desire of mine. And you'll see where it ended up later in life. And so I started working for the largest newspaper in Brazil. I ended up being a photo editor there. I started developing interest for documentary photography, things that had more relevance, that I perceived as having more relevance. Because even though photography is gorgeous, I've always had a beef with photography for myself, because I thought it had to convey some meaning, it had to convey some value. So I worked for a newspaper for a few years, started getting interested in volleyball. Brazil is big on indoor volleyball. And then I ended up moving to the US to be in a relationship. I ended up marrying her. She's a good friend now, and we were married for 14 years. So when I moved here, I had a profession, but I didn't have a career anymore. My career was over. And so I had to start over. And I started by writing, by doing human interest stories and writing my own stories. And this is when I'm going to start showing you a couple of things, and then I'm going to continue telling you stories. So I'm going to share my screen. This is prior to moving to the US, just my first documentary. And there's just a little bit of everything, because there's so much really to show. But this is Cuba. I really fell in love. This is 7 years ago in Cuba. And then I moved to the US, and this is Burning Man. There's a little bit of nudity, if anyone has a problem with it, but just a little. So this is Burning Man in 1997. It was very different than what it is now. And it was a phenomenal experience, because it was really about freedom. And it wasn't as organized, as structured, or as policed, or as it is nowadays. I never wanted to go back, because I never wanted to spoil the first experience of being there and taking pictures. And what I ended up doing, I was there for about a week. At the end, I felt that we were not on equal footing. So I decided to take my clothes off, and I started taking photos of people naked while I was naked too. And it was about the most uncomfortable thing I've ever done in my life. I hated it, but I wanted to do it to honor those I was photographing. A couple more. And then I'm going to return to one more short story. So I'm working in the US. I am trying to make a living at a completely new field, new country, new everything. And I'm getting more and more interested in real stories and relevance and so forth. And my big hero was Sebastião Salgado, the Brazilian photographer who used to belong to Magnum. Now he has his own agency, did Workers, Migrations, one of the most phenomenal documentary photographers that ever existed. And one day I went to San Diego to see a show of his. I knew he was going to speak there. I had met him in person briefly before. And at the end of the show, at his lecture, I came up to him and I said, "Hey," so I spoke Portuguese to him. And I said, "Joe, I would love to work with you." He didn't even notice. He didn't even hear me. It was like I wasn't even there. And then I paused for a moment and I said, because the guy had a major importance in my life. So I stopped for a second and I said to him, Sebastian, I actually want you to teach me how to be a man. And I said that, he stopped on his tracks, and now he's paying attention to me. And now we start talking. So now I exist in front of the guy, and we start having a conversation and having a conversation. And we exchange phone numbers. This is way before cell phones. And we start talking, and he was shooting here in Central California at the time at the plantations, and he was doing the migrations. And I said, I want to work with you. I want to work with you. I'm an amazing assistant. I'm going to change your life. Let me work with you. And he said, oh, you know, I don't really use assistants. I just do my thing, and I relate to my subjects nakedly. I said, okay, but I would love to work with you. And we kept talking and talking. And then he said, let me talk to my wife, who is the director of our agency in Paris, and I'll get back to you. This was probably September 1996. In December, I'm in Brazil in my mother's house, and he calls me and he says, Ciro, we're ready for you. Come work for us in Paris. So I did. I worked for the agency for a couple of months. It was a completely different story because I ended up working with the wife, doing something completely different than what I wanted to do, which was work with him. I wanted to learn how to be a man. I already knew how to be a woman, given my feminine upbringing. I was brought up by women, so I had that part of the training. I wanted to learn the masculine part of the training, and didn't happen. Anyway, so I came back, 1998, and I was disillusioned with photography, and I said, no, let's break up. I'm breaking up with photography, and I'm going to do the other thing that I love, which is psychology, spirituality, understanding human nature. Who are we really? So I went to San Francisco. I studied for 2 years. And then one day, a new friend looks at my work. I hadn't been shooting for 2 years. This is 2000. And she says to me, she looks at my work and she starts crying. And she says, you don't have the right not to be taking photographs. And that hit me. And I said, oh my God, I need to look into this. So long story short, I decided to stop the doctorate in psychology that I was doing. It was not quite the format. Being a therapist was not quite what I was looking for, the format of what I was looking for. And so I stopped, went back to Santa Barbara, where I had been living, and resumed photography. And now I was developing a very different relationship with photography. Still, professional photography wasn't happening. It was more like a hobby. It's hard to say hobby because driven as a professional, it's hard to say hobby, but it was a hobby because it didn't have the intent of making a living with. It was just nourishing my passion. And so I started going toward what had inspired me my whole life, which was the urban environment. I come from São Paulo, 20 million people, one of the largest cities in the world. So that was my upbringing. I started shooting in San Francisco, New York, São Paulo, in Italy, and I started gathering. And this is when I'm gonna again share the screen and show you something else. But before I actually show the urban, I forgot to show you the work that I did for myself, a personal project that I did around the time, right after I came back from Paris and had been working with Salgado, which is more of a documentary project in Brazil. I'll show you a couple of photos of that. And I called it the Stonebreakers of Ilhabela. Ilhabela is an island off the coast of São Paulo in Brazil. And I love books. So this is, I laid out a book and I printed it and I bound it myself. I'll show it to you when I finish this. It's such a palpable, powerful way to handle photography, and it's like real stuff. So this is the story of a profession that is a very long profession for humans, and it's brutal because you're breaking stones day in, day out. And so I pursued this as my personal project, and I wanted to make a book and so forth. It didn't really go anywhere. It was more of of a practice for me in portrait, in documentary. It was kind of putting a little bit to test of what I had drank from my time drooling over Salgado's work. So this is the phase when I'm here back in Santa Barbara, and I'm roaming the cities, and I'm gobbling up any image. Los Angeles, everywhere I go, I can only see images, and it's all architectural, graphic stuff. And you see there's what you see are pages of this book that I laid out. That's always with the exception of some fine art prints, but that's how I relate it to my work, is via printing and binding. And so this is São Paulo. New York, Harlem, actually. São Paulo. Oscar Niemeyer, for those who know. This is the MoMA in San Francisco. Torino in Italy. New York City. This is all early work. It's really when I committed to photography. So my work started becoming deeper, more interesting, more layered. And so I started creating a portfolio in basically the urban environment. And then one day, a friend of mine says, who was a client who purchased a bunch of my fine art work and my portraits. And then he says to me, "Oh, you have to meet an architect, friend of mine." Oops, no, I don't want this to continue. Hold on. You have to meet this architect, friend of mine. You're gonna hit it off because your work is so beautiful. He's such a great architect. And so just to show you very quickly, let's see. So this is the book that I showed you, Stonebreakers, and printed and bound, handmade. Everything was handmade. So it's not just, there's just one print, one sample of the book, but it feels so good to hold it like this. So this is the Stonebreakers of Ilhabela. And then this is the little urbanscapes that I just showed you. Same idea. And then this one I have yet to show you, work that is coming up. This is a very rough, low res, low quality. I was doing a project called Travel Books, and I was going to do different cities, and I was going to do a book, and then the recession hit. I had a sponsor already, but then it went to the trash can. But it ended up morphing into something else. Anyways, I'm doing a really poor job showing this. So back to the friend who wanted me to meet a friend of his who was an architect. Now I'm going to share the screen again. So we do meet, we do hit it off, and he gives me a project to test my skills. And so it was a guest house, this little guest house you're looking at. And being the driven person that I am, I spent a whole week, and I shot with a Leica. At the time I was still shooting film. This is 2002. So I shot, this is a Leica, an M6. I shot with an M6, I shot with a Hasselblad, and I shot with a Sinar. And I shot a lot for a whole week. And then I did a little book, the one did I show you? I don't know if I probably I didn't show you. And so I made it into a little book, and I showed it to him, and he was so excited. Shubin and Donaldson architects, Robin Donaldson. And my first architectural project became my career. I started getting jobs from him. It was a word of mouth. I started getting jobs from everyone in town, and I never really advertised or sought anyone for, and work just kept coming. And it was a very organic and natural process, completely effortless. So this was really the beginning of my architectural career. And this is the end of a little book. And then I continued doing my urban work. This is the CNR shooting Polaroid 55. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but you get to keep the negative, and then you can have, so this is the very high res quality. I'm going to pause it for a second. This is shot with a Type 55 Polaroid, and so I kept the positive, I fixed it, and then the negative, I carried a bucket up and down San Francisco while shooting Type 55. So this is 2005. These are drum scanned files from the Polaroid 4x5. And then what I started doing is, this is the same client. The same client that gave me the first work. This is actually the beginning of the career. I would go to the place and take photos, and then I would show him and show him how I could do it, and I got the job. So this is kind of my own. I never did scouting, but this project I did scouting, and then I showed the photos, and the architect was so excited that he hired me to shoot it, to do the actual. And this was published in the Los Angeles Times magazine at the time. This is one of my favorite photos of all time that I've ever taken. And now, Bill.
Yes, I'm here.
So maybe now I'm going to show architectural photos, and perhaps you can take questions of anyone who might want to ask. I just request that they be related to architectural photography for the time being, and anything else we'll talk at the end, just so we stay on top. I'll answer questions while I talk a little bit about each project that I'm showing. So this is Bahia Beach in Puerto Rico by SB Architects. They're an international firm based in San Francisco. And this was an amazing timing because they sent me there, and a month later, Hurricane Maria hit the island and destroyed a good portion of this house. And this one, let me go back. This one is in Kuwait, in the Middle East. This is a 45,000 square foot home. And it doesn't look that big at all. It was, the proportions are quite amazing, and it has 5 floors. And it was quite an experience to go there. The house was so big that I thought I was going to have time to shoot and then to travel a little bit in the Middle East, but it was impossible because I had to extend my days shooting the house. The client had asked me to do originally 25 or so images, and I ended up doing I shot 300 and he ended up choosing 50 or so. So this is another house. This is a house for you Santa Barbarans. This is on Ashley, and it was destroyed by the mudslides. This house doesn't exist anymore. And it's interesting, intuition. The owners called me one day before and said, you know, my house is looking pristine right now. I want to shoot it while it's pristine. So very interesting. I've never heard such a thing before, quite that way. This is Shubin and Donaldson, Santa Barbara, Toro Canyon, and John Mike Cohen, the owner and the designer. He actually did the design, and then Shubin and Donaldson executed it.
Ciro, I have a couple of questions as we're going.
Go for it.
Curiosity about the camera that you were using for these, and also if you know the architects, if you could share that.
Oh, the architects I just did. Architects of which? Oh, the actual people or the firm?
The question is just to mention the architects. I guess you've done that as you go.
I've been doing it. Yeah, this is John Mike Cohen, who designed the house. It was executed by Shubin and Donaldson. Excuse me. And then so the camera. I shoot. It took me a while. I'm going to pause this for a second. It took me a while to switch to digital. I switched in 2006, and I've had all the 5Ds, and then so this is from Mark II to Mark IV, which what I have right now, except for the little first project that I showed you that had film. Everything else since that has been digital and the 5D, Canon 5D. So this is Newman Mendro Andrulaitis, who's also, they are also my sponsors for my journey that I'll speak about at the end, if we have time. I think we will have time. These projects are in Santa Barbara. This is Malibu. This is rare. I don't really do real estate, but this is a company, a high-end company in Malibu, and they hire me to do their estates when they're ready to sell. They build and then they sell, and they hire me to shoot. It's called Marisol Malibu. And the architects, this architect I don't know. Barry Burkus did something for them that I shot, but I'm not showing here. Sorry, I never knew who the architect for this one is because my contact was with the developer. So this is Allen Construction, and the architect is Peter Becker, who died. He was alive when I shot the house. This is Hope Ranch, a remodel. I love this project. Seldom do you see a remodel that is so juicy to shoot. And this is mostly, I'm going to go back a little bit. I use natural light for everything. I never illuminate stuff. In this particular house, I illuminated, I lit this a little bit and this, but that's about it. Everything else is natural light that I composite so that it looks very, very natural. I can't stand the look of HDR. So this is, again, SB Architects in San Francisco. This is Las Vegas. A house that they built for a developer in Las Vegas. I really like this project. I really like the photos. This is a, oh God, I forgot his name, Neff, in Santa Barbara. This is Newman Mendro Andrulaitis as well. A gorgeous project that they did on the Carpinteria foothills. Be happy to answer any questions while we see architecture. It's very difficult to convey inside, indoor, outdoor in a natural way. Either you overlight it. This is also Newman Andrulaitis. This is Warner Group in Santa Barbara. This is I didn't mention this, and I apologize. Warner Group sent me to Kuwait to shoot that project. That's the one I didn't mention. It's the same company here. And this is Newman Mendro Andrulaitis. And that is that for this one. And any questions so far?
One that's just come in. Did you miss having people to shoot as a part of the architectural scene?
Oh, that's an excellent question. Not at all. Not at all. I think I went through phases in life And I love people and I love interaction and I love silence and emptiness. I'm a very minimalistic photographer. I go in and I take out most everything there. Sometimes we bring in everything. Sometimes I've shot houses that we had to bring in artwork, furniture, what else? Pretty much, yeah, everything. Or we've exchanged it because it was so unflattering to the design. But I like emptiness.
We have one of our members, Zoltan, you have your hand up. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Oh, well, my question was along the same lines. I was wondering if these homes are actually inhabited or are they just stage set for the photography shoot?
Most of them are inhabited. The vast majority. I'd say from everything I showed you, probably if I showed you, I don't know, 15 projects, maybe two or three were kind of staged, or one was a rental. But everything else is either their main home or a second home. A lot of the times it's a second home, but it's fully furnished.
So there were some other questions that have come in. They're all kind of related. So one was how you handle mixed lighting. And the next one is how do you color correct mixed lighting? And how do you decide how much, for example, how much do you make it completely white or not? The third one is related in just how much post-processing you do, and if so, what do you use? Do you use Lightroom, or what do you use for your post-processing?
Okay, so the workflow. I'm assuming color correction with mixed lighting, meaning when I light it with artificial lighting. I know that there are very specific and scientific ways to calibrate and to color correct, and gels and filters, and I try that. And what I realized is I have to be very spontaneous in the way that I move through the work. Otherwise, it's just horrendous for me. So the way I figured it out is this: I get the best color reading that I can in the scene, and then I just shoot stuff like that with whatever differences in sources there are. And then I just deal with it in post-production. And yes, heavy post-production, super heavy post-productions, for two reasons. One, I do my own HDR, so it's compositing, handmade compositing, which is just impossible. I don't recommend it to anyone. And then I go by the pleasure. And I'm probably a lot more interesting if I show this while I'm, so if I show stuff while I'm speaking. So here, this is a cleaner white. Sometimes it's better to go warmer. Sometimes it's better to go cooler, and or cool off these fixtures, so they're not too yellow. So I do it separately. But I wanted to keep the warmth of the reflection of the fireplace that is over there. And so I do it, I mean, there's an overall correction, and then I do very localized corrections. And then I get to what I don't think that there's a right or wrong. It's just, it's either pleasant or unpleasant. So see here, this is warmer, end of the day. There's some fire. This is cooler, early afternoon. And so it's really, this is very cool because it's almost nighttime. This is very cool. So I don't know if that answers the question, but it's really, what I like is to not have contamination, in the sense that something is one thing. It is one thing. It's not blue and yellow. Like for example here, it could be too yellow. I don't know how I did this. How did it become so big? Oh, there you go. So this is pretty neutral. It is an overcast day, which is pretty cool to shoot interiors. I don't think we're missing the ocean there. It's okay. See, this is neutral. There's some warmth in the sunset, but it's neutral. It's fairly neutral, but not too cool. This is pretty warm, even for me. But otherwise, it would be too sterile if I made it any cooler than this. This, I think, benefits from the design to be a little warmer.
Another question has come in asking about tripod versus hand holding your photos.
Oh, zero hand holding. Architectural, zero hand holding. There's no such a thing. I do 20 exposures. There's no hand holding whatsoever. Everything else you saw that has people and travel, that's all. But imagine this. Imagine how many layers I have here to get. Sorry, I'm taking a little beating from the web platform here. I mean, there's so many layers here to add in the different exposures here. There's no way to do this handheld. No, you have to put it on a tripod. I don't even touch the camera. I control the camera with an iPad with a what is it called? Forgot the thing, the router that connects to the camera, and then it triggers the camera, and I do the bracketing without touching, because believe it or not, if you bracket the camera by changing shutter speed on the camera, it shakes, and even if it shakes 1 or 2 pixels, it's like hell it's out of register. So you really don't want to touch the camera, and you want a heavy tripod, and that's about it. And I'll be happy to answer more questions while I prepare to show you something else.
A question about lenses that you use. Do you ever use tilt shift lenses or?
Yes, I do. My favorite lenses, my favorite is the 17 tilt shift Canon, and the 24, the new version of the 24. The old version, it was so bad optically, it was horrendous. The new one is good, and I haven't bought yet the new lenses, the 50, I forgot what the other one is, and I think there's a 50, a 90, and a 135 tilt shift.
Yeah.
I think I only need the 50. I don't need the other two. They're too long. And sometimes I use the zoom, like a 24-70, or sometimes I even use a 70-200, all Canon, without tilt shift. And then I either shoot level or I correct perspective in post. So I'll show you a few more different faces of mine with this desire for photography, for the urban design, architecture, and the fascination with the urban environment. I took that little urbanscapes to a different level, and I turned it into what I called the travel books. And I did one on São Paulo, on the city of São Paulo, and I did one on Paris. And I'm going to show you 2 clips, and even though they're QuickTime, I think you'll be fine because they're stills. And if for some reason it's looking horrible, just tell me and we'll just scratch it.
Ciro, just a reminder when you do your next screen share, if it's going to be with sound from the video or the web, to click that little box on your share screen.
Awesome. Thank you for reminding me. Yes. Okay, so let's switch to this. And I'm going to start, and then you tell me if the sound is good, and if the transition, and if the quality image is good. This is high definition here for me. See. So this is Paris. Then I'm going to show you a clip from Sao Paulo, travel books. And I had sponsors, and I was showing this at the Presidio in Santa Barbara in a huge inflatable screen. It was really fun. This is 2011, 2012. So this is Sao Paulo. How did the video go?
The video pieces, the transitions throughout were a little jerky. The video worked from my end all right.
Okay, cool.
Zoltan, do you have another question?
Yeah, basically, until the end of the Brazil, Sao Paulo images, I noticed there was a big difference in the way you photograph people in Paris, where you always seem to catch somebody looking directly into the camera. And in Sao Paulo, it was kind of the opposite. You were kind of at a distance there, but near the end there, you did a lot of, quite a few images of people that were looking right into the camera. And I was wondering, how far apart were these completed?
Paris, I shot in 2007, 2008. In Sao Paulo, I shot across many years. Some overlap with Paris. I think Sao Paulo is such an intense and at times violent city that there's kind of a distance, there's more of a reservation. And the people that I shot up close are actually in a situation that is almost like a park where there's more interaction, with the exception of the video part, which was it's the equivalent to a farmer's market. It's like a fair. They happen in every neighborhood in Sao Paulo, in Brazil. And people are super friendly and everybody's smiling. And so everyone is looking into the camera. And that's the clip. It's the friendliness, the relatedness of Brazilians and so forth.
Couple of comments and questions come in.
Yes.
One that says, I see one more career for you, on location fashion photography based on the lady with the Zara bag.
That's the only one I probably will never pursue.
A comment about your soundtrack about Sao Paulo. Wow, I was enjoying that too. I'm curious about what your soundtracks were. And then a comment just that your people had so much movement you didn't notice when the video started. So all good stuff.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that. I love that comment. Thank you for that. If you send me an email, and you can find my information on inwardride.com. Inward ride as in motorcycle, inward ride. I'll talk about it later. And I'll be happy to send you the names of the two songs, or three, I think, total, Paris, Sao Paulo. Thank you for your comments and for all your questions. I want to show you, and then the transition in the next 10 years, so we're in 2002, was from the urban to the natural. And then I became, which is something that I never honestly was very interested in. I was a nut for the built environment, and then I became a nut for the unbuilt environment. Maybe that's what getting older is. So I'm going to show a quick transition into my subject matter, what I started shooting, and now this is the hobby. And so careers and hobbies in the hobby, the two tracks, career and hobby, very strong, very personal, happening simultaneously. I'm always carrying a camera. Right now I'm not. And then I have breaks when I don't take one photo, which is happening right now. And then I go back full on. But I've always had the track. And everything you saw was that was not initially professional, but I ended up either creating a career or informing my professional, my career. And now I'm going to show you a little bit of natural, and then inward ride, and then that's it. So let me share the screen one more time. So these are a couple of images in our neighborhood. You might recognize this. Off Camino Cielo, this is Ojai. Citrus, this is Ojai too. Just a few. Ojai. Padaro, the Padaro Hill, the Summerland Beach. This is Sao Paulo. Butterfly, Summerland. Miami Beach. Big Sur. Camino Cielo. And this is Jackson Hole. This is my first long motorcycle trip to, this is Arches in Utah. Arches in Utah. And then now I'm going to tell you a little story, and then I'll show you what Inward Ride is. So, any questions so far?
There was one.
Oh, I'm reading the hobby. iPhone. Hey, Eric. Good to see you here. Now I carry a Fuji. My everyday camera is a Fuji X Pro 2. What's the name again? X Pro 2. X Pro 2. And I have one zoom because it's hell to switch lenses when you're traveling because of the dust. So I don't want to switch lenses anymore. I have one zoom, which is it's equivalent to a 24 to 85, something like that, 16 to 55, I think it is. And it's a phenomenal optical quality. And then I carry that, and then I carry a, so I would say that's the hobby, even though I use it professionally as well. And the Canon, I have 17, 24 tilt shift. I had a zoom 24 to 70, but it broke. I haven't needed it. And I have a 70-200. And these are the 70-200 on the Canon 5D Mark IV and the X Pro 2 with the zoom are my, it's what I took on my 3 months sabbatical. And I don't, you know, the thing about iPhone for me is, see, I'm an old timer. I'm 55. I learned how to take a picture hiding the world entirely. So I have to see everything in here. The iPhone, I don't separate the world from what I'm shooting. And that's a problem for me. Even though when I shot 4x5 on a CNR, I could frame it and upside down. But then actually not true, because there was the cloth that isolated the world. So I have a problem just because I've been doing this for 40 years through a little hole. I shoot a lot with the iPhone and some photos are good, but not my best work for sure. And landscape, it's really, it's not, I don't think there's a lens for this or for that. I think what's important is to test lenses for optical quality. And there's a major difference between lenses, and some of them are just phenomenal. And I'll leave it at that. Let me tell you, actually, let me tell you a quick story here. So 2 tracks on my, in my life: photography, beauty, natural beauty in outer life. And then internally, I've had depression for 36 years. So I've had to work really hard to stay afloat. My mind was the biggest challenge of my life, not the external circumstances. And the way that I found to do that is to develop a practice, to study psychology, to study spirituality, to dedicate myself to understanding, okay, if what my mind tells me is not real, what is real then, right? So the 2 tracks of photography, the career, and then the career that I've explored in different forms, psychology, when I was doing the doctorate, and then I continue studying my own program and doing trainings and retreats and teachers and so forth. And a year ago in March, I had the biggest breakdown of my life. I reached rock bottom. I was in Brazil, and I realized that I couldn't continue the way I was. And basically, I had to make a choice. Either I had no life left, the way I had been living, or I had to really go full on to, okay, who am I? I need to be, and who am I is not an abstract question. It's like, if I'm not everything that I've been pretending that I am, the shell of success and what being a man is and what I need to accomplish and so forth, if that doesn't work for me, what does? And so I started asking questions. And one of the things I did is I asked the following question. I said, okay, if I had been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or if I had won the lottery, what would I do? And the answer was the same. I would go on a motorcycle journey immediately. So I said, why am I going to wait for either? No way I'm going to wait for either. My life is over as it is anyways. Let's try something different. So I created a project called Inward Ride. First, it was going to be a journey of my own. And then my marketing skills kicked in. I said, I'm going to make this into a project. And I want to make a contribution to people. So I started a blog. I started writing about my experience with depression, not as a pity party, but as, okay, so what is this from the inside out? And what avenues and solutions have I found for this? So I created this project. I got sponsorship. I got a lot of people donated to help me with this. I went to do a ketamine treatment for treatment-resistant depression in Portland. So I pointed my compass in that direction. And I did the treatment. I did a bunch of other things. And it was one of the most important things I've done in my life. One of the most remarkable things, because basically I chose myself in a way that was such loyalty and integrity. And then I've been practicing living a life that caters to who I am. And what is that on a daily basis? And so what happened was, a year later, I decided finally, and simultaneously I've been asking, okay, so I need to share what I know. I know a lot, but what is the format? And so I realized that, so I decided to create a practice in which I mentor and support and guide people. It's kind of a transformation leader, or one way of putting it. But in a very grounded way, with tools that really are practical from psychology and spirituality. Tools that really make a difference for a person suffering. Because in any situation in life, the one thing that is the same is the relationship that we have to ourselves. And that's what I teach, is how to create compassion and powerful ways to relate to yourself in any situation of suffering. And then COVID strikes, and I said, that's it. In 3 weeks, I created what I call the Connection series. I've had 3 groups already. 2 of them are in the second phase, Connection Series 2. I have a new group starting in July. It's open. If anyone is interested, you can find out on inwardride.com. And feel free to contact me with any questions. I'll be happy to talk in person. And I went on this phenomenal trip. And I'm going to show you a couple of photos of this trip. And then I'll be happy, if we have time, I'll be happy to answer any more questions. So this is a very short version of, this is the pre-trip setup, attempting to take things, and things got a lot, this was too heavy, too big. Then it got smaller. This is the final setup. This is me riding, first night camping in Morro Bay. I had camped 6 times in my life when I started this trip. So I was really, really scared, and I was very prepared, but I had no experience. This is in Oregon, so I'm making my way to Portland to do the treatment. This is Mount Hood, and I was about 35 pounds heavier than I am now. Silicon Bridge in Portland.
Nice shot.
Thank you. This is me when I'm shooting others riding motorcycle, the 2 camera setups. Columbia River Gorge, Highway 30, historic Highway 30 on the gorge. It was breathtaking. This is Wakena Falls, also in Portland. Corbett, technically. This is Gresham in that area where I stayed. This is High Rock. I crashed a wedding party or they crashed my photo up. This is me. Oh, so what happened was my plan was to go to Canada, but it got cold too quickly. So I turned around and I went south. I went to the desert, and I was resisting going to the desert so much. I wanted to go north to mountains, and then I ended up going to Utah. So here I am in Oregon, making my way to Idaho. This is a camping site, and a guy that was camping put his dog on my bike. I didn't see it. I saw the photo later. Making my way to Utah. The beast, my steed. This is Utah, Colorado River. This is Canyon Lens, one of the most phenomenal things I've ever seen in my whole life. It's worth pausing for a second. It was breathtaking. There's nothing, I wrote a blog about this, a blog post. There's nothing I can say that will do justice to this experience for those who haven't been there. This is Schaefer Trail, also in the Canyonlands. It's a paradise for off-road. Same here. I couldn't do this part because my rear brake stopped working. And that's when you need rear brakes, is when you're going down on a dirt road. Otherwise, you can do the front. Colorado River. This is Valley of the Gods, making my way back. What is this called? I forget. Monument Valley. Going to this is Zion. And again, I'm just showing a couple of photos of each thing. This is my first spill in 3 months, and it was completely silly. So this is a 600-pound motorcycle with another 200 pounds, and I lifted this whole thing alone without unloading. I said, there's no way I'm going to unload this, and I did it. Mojave, going to Joshua Tree. And this is Ojai. I ended my trip in Ojai. I spent 3 nights here before I moved back to my house. And then so that's where I camped in the Denison Park. This is after I returned with a friend, dear friend Dion, and there's snow in the mountains. It was gorgeous, and the light. It looks like I have a major artificial light. It's the sun. It's so beautiful. It looks like studio lighting outdoors. Topa Topa with a little snow, and then up on 33 with a lot of snow. And this is back in Ojai. So that is it, my friends. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Comments, complaints, rants.
One question that's in the chat currently is, what lens do you prefer for landscape photography?
Whichever is really good optically. Because of what I do, for me, landscape nowadays, I mean, I have a 90 millimeter Fuji that is the equivalent to a 135 and 35 millimeters. That is the sharpest lens I've ever used. And sometimes I do landscapes with that. The 70-200, the way it separates the background, it's beautiful. I mean, this is so personal. I have a tendency not to go for the super wide angle thing. I like to limit it a little more. I see the question now. Well, what do you mean by how I came to this style? I don't understand the question.
I was just watching your style, and just curious how you came to uh, find this appealing, because your images appear like more contrasty and more saturated. A lot of people like that. I'm just wondering, is this natural, or did you emulate someone, or did you change your styles as you grew as a photographer?
Do I hear you're saying that you don't like that? You prefer some more
No,
muted?
no, no, not at all.
Which would be
Not,
completely fine. Which would be
not at
completely fine.
all. Not at
Uh,
all. I like your
um,
style. I just wondering why you do it that way.
well, I am an intense person, in case you haven't noticed. I started out, my architectural work was so intense that some people called it hyper realism. It was so intense, saturated and dark and contrasted and so forth. And then I've been softening actually, I've been going the other way around. I went from highly intense to a lot more dynamic range in terms of color and saturation and even highlights and shadows. So because I am so intense, in other words, I don't do half anything. I do full everything. I am fully in and on everything I take on and do. And photography is no different. And so I think it's just an expression of my personality. But trust me, it's been softened. It's a lot less.
Thank you.
It's a lot less. Thank you, Judith, for your comment, for my candidness. Yes, part of the healing is addressing shame. So we're all human. We all have challenges, and it's actually very rewarding to not have to protect or to hide or to have a pose or to have to create. Oh, I'm the photographer, which is nowadays is not even a thing anymore. Everyone is a photographer. When I started, it was a thing. It's like you're a celebrity, you're a movie director. Nowadays, you're nothing. Everyone is a photographer, and I'm happy with it because I'm not even a photographer. I'm just myself. I'm myself on a daily basis, trying to figure out what that is, and then I happen to take photos, and I happen to teach people to be real with themselves as well. Thank you, Eric. Yeah. You're part of it too. We did a Hoffman quadrinity process, a friend who's writing here. That was one of the most transformative experiences in my life, 2015 in the healing process. But it's an ongoing, there's no getting anywhere. It's always unfolding. Anyone wants to speak and say something, or I love participation.
I want to say thank you to you for being here and the advanced work that you did, and thanks to Deb Gibson for connecting and getting you to join with us and share this information. We've had great turnout. Our high point was 46 participants tonight. That's a real high point for us, and you really appreciate the sharing that you did tonight, Ciro.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you for having me over. It's the first time I've done this on Zoom, and it actually not too bad.
Thank you, Ciro. I mean,
thank you.
As I said, it was very serendipity that I found you, and I think what you've shared with everybody is just phenomenal. And
thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And whoever wants to reach out, if I can help you in any way, if you have questions, I'm here, inwardride.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be well, everyone.